Hey guys, how's it going? So I have finally launched my latest course, the Digital Painting Mega Course. If you haven't seen the promo video, check that out. But this is a section, an entire section from the course on photorealistic digital painting. And I wanted to put this up here so that if you're wondering if it's something that you're interested in or if you would like my teaching style, you can see and get a feel for it. And if not, well, then just enjoy this free content. But if you do want more and you want something that's going to go in more depth, you can go ahead and take the entire course. So this video, like I said, the whole course is divided up into 14 sections, and this is just one of those sections. The rest of the course, this is just one of the painting styles it teaches, but it teaches 4 other different styles of digital painting, as well as covering a whole bunch of other topics such as light and color, custom brushes, painting fundamentals, stuff like that. So if it's something you're interested in, definitely check it out. The normal price for this course is $200, but for all of my YouTube subscribers, you can get it for only $15, and it'll be at that price permanently for YouTube subscribers. And once you, just some questions that people ask a lot in the comments to help answer them. Once you buy the course, you own it for life. You don't have to take it within a certain time frame. It's a series of videos, and you can take it whenever you have the time and resources to do so. And it's not subscription based or anything like that. So if it sounds like something you're interested, or you watch this and you think that it was helpful and you want something more in depth, then definitely check out the full course. The full course is 13 hours long with tons of great content. And all you have to do is click on the link in the description or use discount code YTDiscount with all capital letters, YT as in YouTube. That is true for any of my courses. So if you enjoy it, check them out. I hope you can learn something. Hey guys, so in this section we're going to be talking about photorealistic digital painting. Now, what that is when your painting is designed and meant to look as real as possible, almost like a photograph. So this is going to include things like hyperactive lighting, lots of photo textures put in, photo overlay and effects like that to make it look like a photograph, depth of field, stuff like that. Now, this is a art style that you're mostly probably going to be using for possibly illustration work, like for book covers and stuff like that, as well as concept art, like, final end concept art where the rough stuff has been broken out and you're looking to finalize the look for something. This is something that can be used pretty frequently. And personally, it's one of my favorite art styles. I really like painting like this. I love seeing something come to life that I was able to create out of my head. But it does have its downsides. One downside is that it takes a really, really long time. This is probably by far the longest painting style, and a single painting can go anywhere from 5 to 10 hours or even further to complete, which if you're trying to do a comic book or pump out a bunch of quick concept art or something like that, it's not really a viable option because of how long it takes unless you happen to have plenty of time for some reason. So there's that downside. The other possible downside is that it isn't quite as expressive as some of the other art styles like the cutout or cell shading and stuff like that, things where you can get a little bit more cartoony and interpret things a little bit differently. You can exaggerate stuff. In the photoreal style, it can be a little bit harder to make that work. It's possible, but it definitely takes a master hand to be able to pull it off and still make it look right. So those are kind of the pros and cons. This section is a long one, so stick with it. But the techniques that you'll learn are really valuable, and I find that this is a style that a lot of people want to learn because of its a lot of people are looking for this in the industry, in the concept industry, to be able to really, really nail down concepts and make them as real as possible so they could see exactly what it might look like in the movie or video game or whatever project it is you're working on. So I'm going to get started. This whole section is going to be all about photorealistic digital painting. So as usual, what we always need to start out with is some sort of a drawing or under drawing to start with. Now, when I'm doing this, I like to start with a gray background. And the reason I do this is because when you're putting in the values, your value range goes all the way from black to white. Now, if your background is white, then you're starting at your brightest value range already, and you can't go brighter than that, which tends to make everything else look too dark, right? All your highlights look too dark, all the colors look too dark, because there's nothing brighter than white. So I like to start with a nice mid-tone so that we still have room to go brighter or we have room to go darker, okay? We're going to make sure we have our layer set to multiply. we're going to use, what brush do we want to start with? I'm going to start with the round brush with the opacity brought down and nice gray color. Okay, we can make it a little darker. And we're going to start sketching in our underdrawing. Now, what I had in mind was kind of this dragon type character that was reminiscent of a chameleon, is what I was thinking. So like sort of like a chameleon turned into a dragon or something of the sort. So I'm keeping it really rough and really loose to start out with, and really thinking about the overall shape, the forms, right? Where horns and stuff like that might end up. Okay, his legs. Sometimes I like to bring my canvas down in size a little bit so it's easier for me to see the overall picture for just a minute while I'm painting. I want to get these wings up a little bit more so that they can help break up the silhouette. Now I want the head, I think, to come out a little bit more on a longer neck. I want it to be a little bigger or smaller. We want a little bigger. Adjust the size of his legs here. Rework the tail some more. Okay. Alright, so that looks pretty good, I think, for our rough sketch of where we want to start off with things. Just exploring some shapes here for his mouth. Alright, and I think that looks pretty good for a rough sketch. Alright, so our next step is going to be to add a new layer, and we're going to start to refine this underdrawing a little bit more. So I'm going to set this one to multiply. We're going to take the layer beneath it and go ahead and lower the opacity till we can barely see it. Okay, and then I'm going to be sure to bring my brush size down a bit so I can get a little bit more detailed with my strokes. And let's go ahead and come in here and really start to refine some of this and get it a little bit more detailed. Okay, so while it does have some sort of chameleon characteristics, it also, I want it to not just be a chameleon with wings essentially. I just want it to sort of remind us of a chameleon. So I'm being sure to not just throw everything in on that bandwagon and copy that from nature directly, but I just want to be inspired by it. So the eyes is definitely something we're going to keep, okay? Are those big chameleon eyes. But before we do that, actually, we should probably kind of sketch in where we think the mouth is going to go. Horn here on this forehead. We're going to do two of them, a bigger one and a smaller one. Some little spikes up there on his eye. A few spikes down here on his neck. Let's start working in here on some of the parts of his legs.
Okay, his whole head I'm going to bring down in size a little bit. It's a little bit too large. I think that looks better. And I'm going to do a little bit of a kind of this horn sort of shape on his head. A little bit more reminiscent of a chameleon there. Okay. Then we have his other hand. Let's do his back leg here. Okay. Working in some of these muscle groups, some scales that we want to add. Right, excellent. And I think it'll be really cool also when we can get some fun colors going on in here, which we'll be able to get to later, but I'm just thinking about that in my head right now as I draw this. And then his little spikes that we'll have all down his back. Now luckily in this art style, the photoreal style, even though it's going to be photorealistic, we don't actually have to get super crazy detailed with our drawing in order for this to work. We can keep things pretty rough, pretty loose, and it's going to actually help it turn out a lot better. So I think we're about done with this layer. Maybe just a few more pieces in the wood here. Okay. And trying to think if maybe we want any sort of ears or antenna or anything like that coming off. I think that could be fun. Or if maybe we want to rework the horns, because I'm not 100% sold on them. They're not bad. I kind of want to see what other options we have. We could do the 3-horn configuration or something more like that. Something arcing back. Actually, I think we're just going to keep it with this. Keep it pretty simple. It still has that chameleon feel to it. But I do think maybe some ears, or perhaps like some leafy texture. Just trying to think, brainstorm here. We don't always have to go with just the first pass of things. Okay, but you know, it actually looks pretty good for the first try. Maybe we don't really need anything. I can add a few leaves here on this stick, this plant, or this log, or whatever that he's on. So that will help kind of give us a scale of how big this thing is. He's pretty tiny. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So we're gonna go ahead, after I finish adding in a few of these scales here on his tail, we're gonna go ahead and call this good for this layer and move on to the next one. So all right, so let's go ahead and lower the opacity on this layer. We're going to do our refined drawing here, so I'm going to lower this one even more. Okay, make a new layer, set this one to multiply as well. We're going to bring our brush size down even more. And this is probably going to be our final line art layer here. If we need to do another one, we will though. So let's go ahead and start sketching this in and darkening things up. I'm going to bring up my opacity a little bit and darken this a little bit as well. Okay, and let's actually, I'm going to not start with the horn. I'm going to start with the eye. So I'm actually already looking at this thinking we're probably going to do one more layer on top of this. It's always better to have to do extra layers and get a little tighter than to mess up and need to go back and fix things, but you've already committed to stuff. That's the worst. So it's okay to do more layers. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay. In fact, I recommend that. So okay, so I'm making sure I'm picking up a little bit more of these details, trying to get a little bit more refined with my lines so that it's not so loose, and taking out a lot of the guesswork so that when we go to paint this, we don't have to try and guess where certain lines line up and stuff. We can just look and see pretty clearly with the line art where things are supposed to go. Okay, so that's why we're trying to come in here and get a little bit more detailed. And just so that his teeth aren't overlapping here, I'm going to have his mouth be just barely open. All right, which means we'll need to clean this up. Clean some of this up as well. So we're just filling in his mouth here. Reworking some of the details here so that everything makes sense. All right, there we go. No, that doesn't quite look right still. We really want to, especially since this is going to be photoreal, we really got to make sure that the proportions and everything line up correctly. Otherwise, even if we render it really nicely, it just won't make a lot of sense. I might end up needing to kind of sketch out the structure of the head here. All right, there we go. That looks better. There we go. That looks better. Now, the reason why I'm able to make this kind of look like a chameleon, even though I didn't use references, because I've done a lot of studying of animals and practiced a lot in my free time. So I've kind of built up this mental library of anatomy and reference of what these creatures look like. So for you, even though I didn't use reference, you probably should, unless you're already at that point. Okay, just go look up whatever it is you want to draw, whatever it's going to be inspired by, and come up with some good reference photos for it so that you can make it look accurate. Because if I hadn't done all that practice and really put in the time and the effort to really make it look good, then it wouldn't be turning out this well, and it wouldn't look as much like a chameleon as it does, right? I wouldn't be able to draw upon that information and accurately portray that. So make sure that you're using reference, or at least doing a lot of studies before you just jump in to draw this, because that's really going to help you when you're trying to design your own creatures and make things look realistic. If you don't do that, you're definitely going to have some problems, and you might end up getting pretty frustrated. So don't get frustrated, just practice. I'm using my lasso tool to just rearrange some of the shapes on his face a little bit. Give us some more room for different things. Okay. Just working his toes here, trying to think about those in perspective and how they might interact with things and look. His shoulder blade here. I'm going to turn the layer below it down a little bit more. So I'm getting a little bit too much interference, and I want to be able to see more clearly what layer I'm working on. Okay. Doing this other hand now. To make things a little bit more straight here, we really want it to feel like his hand is stretched out here. And let's rework these toes, they're a little large. Okay, there we go. Excellent. And I think also part of the problem is that this is too far stretched out. It needs to be a little shorter in order to make a lot of sense with where the rest of the anatomy is. So something probably a little bit more like that would make more sense, I think. Okay. And then we'll do his back leg here. Just pull this whole thing back so it's not touching that other foot. Excellent. Let's see, we have his wings and his tail still, as well as some of these details down here in his legs. So let's go with the wings real quick. Think about the anatomy of these wings in perspective instead of just drawing them flat or, straight up. Really trying to think about how they might lay and fall against his back. Okay, wings are something that's pretty hard for a lot of people to really get right. So what I recommend is really studying a lot of reference photos. It's good to look at other artists' ideas of how they do wings, but it's also really good to just study things like bats and things in nature that have wings already, because you're going to get a lot of good ideas from those. Okay. So yeah, this is still pretty loose. We're going to end up doing one more pass on top of this to really help solidify things, because we don't want it to be quite this rough. Shorten that. Okay. He's got these nice big claws here on his wings so that he can climb on trees and different stuff like that. When he lands from flying, he can just come down and clamp onto a tree there or something. Alright. His tail down here. And I'm working in here under his belly. Figuring out where exactly all of this stuff goes. Yeah, the wing is still pretty messy there, so we're definitely going to need to do another layer to help clean that up. But we can start to bring in a little more of these muscle groups here. And we'll get a little bit more refined with the scales on the next layer. Focus on that last one. So we're going to go ahead and do that. We're just going to stay in the same lecture. But let's go ahead and make a new layer. We're going to set this one to multiply. Let's go ahead and lower the opacity on the one beneath it. And the one beneath that will lower even more. And the one beneath that will really push back as well. Okay. There we go. And now on this layer, we can, I think we'll be good to go on sort of finalizing some of this stuff, so that it's ready to paint. Okay. He's got the nose, the mouth. Do we want some up on his head? I don't think we do, actually. I'll leave it smooth up there. But we will do a couple on his eyes here. I think in order for these horns to go in the right angle, we're going to need to bring them down more like that. Going along nicely. Let's see, we're missing still his ear. Go ahead and do that. Let's do his neck here. We are going to have these little spines show up on his neck, his back. Alright, so that hand looks pretty good. Let's move on over here to the other hand on the other side. I'm just thinking about the anatomy that's beneath these fingers and these structures here in order to get the shape right. So once again, if you don't have a lot of practice, your best bet is going to be to look up some reference. I think that's probably the number one biggest mistake I see in beginner artists' work, is that I can tell they either haven't studied their source enough or they're not using reference, and that causes their art to look kind of fake. It doesn't have a lot of the detail they would like it to have, and you know, it's a relatively simple fix. It just requires effort and time, and a lot of people don't want to have to put that effort in, and so they don't. But then it ends up showing through in their work. So make sure you put the effort in and understand what it is you're drawing and what you're trying to go for. Move on over here to this back leg. Trying to get some more wrinkles in here. This is a pretty wrinkly guy. And these toes here I think need to be a little bit longer to kind of help match what else is going on with the other one. So go ahead and bring him down like that. No, that doesn't look great. We're probably just gonna have to go ahead and redraw them really quick. So let's do that. I want to make sure that these aren't looking funky or anything. Okay, there we go. That looks a little better. Bring in rest of this wood texture up in here. Perfect. Let's work these little spikes down the back here. They'll get smaller and smaller and smaller until they pretty much just disappear there. Okay. That tail in there. Excellent. Another thing I'd like to do, well, really quick before I do that, let's tighten this up a little bit. It's a little bit too big there. Alright, so another thing I like to do at this stage as well is to just go ahead and flip the canvas. It lets you get a fresh take at things and see if there's anything that's out of perspective or that kind of looks weird or anything. And I think something that looks weird is his neck and his chest here, that it doesn't fill out enough. And that it should come more like that, I think. There you go. Alright, and besides that, I think everything looks good, so let's go ahead and flip it back and keep going. His claw here. Okay, so we're working these wings now. Those are looking real good. Got the other side over here to do. Okay, awesome. So those wings look great. Everything is about done. The last thing I want to do now while we're on this layer is go ahead and add some scales just everywhere that we're going to have them. So I'm thinking about the reference that I've studied before and what I've kind of memorized in my head about reptiles and chameleons and alligators and stuff like that, and just other photos I've looked at and how I want to do this. And I think I want kind of these, instead of going with like the beaded look that most chameleons have, I want to go with more of this plated look. Okay, so that's what we're going to do for most of it. On his head though, I think we're going to keep things pretty smooth on that part, on top of his head. So remembering that these plates, these scale plates, they need to be following the form of the arm or whatever it is that they're on. So that's why I'm curving some of them, is because I'm trying to imagine that they're wrapped around these shapes instead of just sort of sitting on top of them. You might notice I'm not doing every square inch in scales, right? I'm just kind of going around to a few places that I think would benefit from having them, but I'm not trying to overdo it on the whole thing. It can be tempting at this point to just kind of get sloppy, and because I mean you've gone pretty far and you've done a lot of drawing and you just want to hurry up and finish and move on to the color, but make sure that you take your time and really render everything equally as you go through and get to the end. Even though it might take a while and it's not necessarily the funnest part possibly for you to sit here and do all this tiny detail work. Some people like it, other people don't really. But it's worth it to really sort of take your time and make it all the way to the end. So don't just throw in the towel and speed through it. Make sure you go all the way and really take your time. And then all we have left now is his leg here. So let's go ahead and finish those up. And I want to make sure I'm getting these right. Those ones looked kind of weird. And then let's bring in some of these elements of the log. Alright, so keeping it pretty loose in the log here because that's not going to really be the focal point. We're going to be using a lot of photo textures for that anyways, but besides that, I think that looks really great for our rough drawing here. And we are ready to move on to our color phase. So,
alright, so this next step is going to be to add in our flat colors. So to do this, I went ahead and merged all of our line art layers to one layer, and I created a new layer underneath that. It's got to be set to normal, and this is what we're going to use to color on. Now, I'm just using the acrylic brush in Procreate. It honestly doesn't matter a whole lot what brush you use. We're just going to be filling in the flat colors, nothing fancy, no lighting or anything like that. So you can use whatever you want. I'm going to use the acrylic brush just because I like the way it blends. And we're going to bring the opacity down to about 50% around there. And you want to make sure that you're on the right layer, which we are. And you can come in here and start painting. Now, I'm going to actually be painting this green because he is a chameleon. Or do we want to go green? We could go with something completely different if we want. Maybe blue, purple, let's see. More of a teal color. I actually want to go with this yellow-green color. So what we're painting here is we're imagining what color this is without any sort of light or shadow on it, okay? Now, it's not really possible in the real world, but that's what I want you to try and picture when you paint this. So for the flat color, it's going to be a little bit
less bright, somewhere around there. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to bring the opacity up just a little bit on that. And we can come in here and start painting in the colors for this guy. Okay, I'm going to bring my background layer just a little darker here, and I'm also going to put a little bit of green in it. Okay, there we go. So come in here, we're going to start painting this in. Okay, we don't have to be perfect with this. We want to make sure we're not going outside the lines, right? But it doesn't have to be exact. We kind of like this painterly feel because it's going to help, even though it seems counterintuitive that it's not super detailed, that's really loose, it is actually going to help us have more realism later on in our painting. Okay. Now, not all of this is just going to be one flat color. I'm going to be coming in here and changing some of these values and these hues to get different effects. Now, I'm not going to be doing any sort of really specific markings at this point, right? And no stripes or stuff like that. That's something that we add towards the very end with a multiply layer. But for now, what we're focusing on is just the overall main color of things, okay? So I mean, you can bring this a little warmer and add a few sections that have a little bit of yellow to them. Okay. Maybe actually we want to reverse that. We want the yellow more down here. Okay. You're just going to go through and fill in the whole thing. Now remember, the more color variations you do, like if you make this crazy rainbow, the more work you're going to have to do when you're lighting it, which is fine if you want to do that. Just be aware, okay? If you want to keep it more simple, then the less color variations, the better. However, it's also going to be a little less appealing. It's not going to have as much depth and life feeling to it because everything is just one flat color. So keep that in mind as well. You're just going to have to find that perfect balance between the two in order for it to really work out nicely for what it is you want to do. So we're coming down here on his arm. You can see that I'm keeping my brush pretty big here, and because we have the opacity down, it blends pretty nicely. We don't have a lot of crazy hard edges or anything like that. Okay. Alright, let's go ahead and get some of this yellow back in here and start to switch things up. We're going to bring it even warmer. And go ahead and bring almost this orange color in here on part of his arm here. I'm going to go all the way over here to red and do this spot up here on his head. Just experimenting here. If I don't like something, I can always go back and undo it or change it. I'm not sure I'm digging that much red. But maybe a little bit of red somewhere I think would look pretty good. Excellent. Let's get the inside of his mouth here. Let's come back over here to our green. We're going to bring in this darker green and really start to fill in a few more of these sections that we want to. Oh, it's a little bit too bright there. That we want to bring in more, a little bit too saturated as well. Let's bring it back. There we go. So some of these areas over here on his scales will knock in a little bit. Okay. Up here on his back, it's pretty bright. We're going to knock that back as well. Okay. Down here on his hand, top of his head, I'm going to push back into this green color, this darker green. Right now this is all feeling a little bit bright, so what I'm going to go ahead and do, after I finish this section of the tail here and his arm, I'm going to go ahead and take this whole layer. We're going to lower the brightness just a little bit as well as the opacity. We're going to bring both of those down. And I think this is more around the range we want to be painting in right now. Okay. Alright. Excellent. Let's get this a little darker here. We're going to do some sections back here on his neck. Kind of like these sort of fall, autumny colors mixed with the green. right. Darker green for his front of his face over here, I think. Okay, I want to get a red in here. And we're going to start to add a little bit of warmth to a few of these sections here. And we're going to get real bright red on his tail. I don't know if I like the red there. I think we're just going to keep his tail green. We don't really want that to become a focal point, but we can warm it up just a little bit at least. Okay. And then I'm going to bring in just a little bit of this grayish blue color as well in some areas too. Just kind of to break up some of this contrast here. Break up all the warms we have going on. And I'm starting to see this trend of this blue stripe going in between, and I kind of really like that, so I'm going to actually push that a little further here and really send that home. I really like that effect and the color it gives. I'm picking up a little bit more of this red to throw in on some of these areas back here. The top of his legs here and some areas that just need to be have a little bit more pushed back on them. And we need to, let's do his wings a little better here. Let's get some of this red color and put it on the underside of the wings. Awesome. So that looks pretty great. We're just going to go ahead and do now his horns here and his claws. Excellent. And his claws are going to be similar sort of color. Okay, and then the last thing after we do that is going to be the tree. Oh, and these claws up here in his wings. I don't want to forget those. Bring the opacity up a bit on this. So it is going to be this wooden color, but we are going to have a few spots of greenery on here. So even on the wood here, I'm making some variation. So we're not just dealing with flat colors. At this stage, it's still going to look really rough, right? It might seem a far cry away from getting anywhere that's could be considered photorealistic, but just be patient. This painting style really takes a while. It's a process, okay? But by the time you're done, you'll be pretty impressed. You'll be amazed at what you did. And even though this seems like it's starting really loose and you might be itching to really start adding some detail work, you're really going to want to make sure that you start loose like this. Otherwise, if you get too tight too fast, what will happen is that you won't have enough looseness to really tighten things up and make them look accurate because you did that too quickly. Okay, so that looks good. Last little bit, I do want to take this greenish blue color and push it just a little more in the center area here. And then on his back, push this some more. And then his stomach. That looks good for our color layer, and we can go ahead and move on to the next lecture.
Okay, so we're now ready to move on to our shadow layer. To do this, we're going to create a new layer that's on top of our line art. We're going to set it to multiply, okay? Then I'm going to come to our line art layer, and I'm actually going to lower the opacity just a little bit so it's not quite as prominent. We really want to start focusing on values here. It's right about there, looks good.
Color is fine. Okay, so I'm going to be imagining that this guy's lit by sun, which means the shadows are going to have a little bit of a blue look to them. So I'm going to get this nice dark blue color, bring my opacity down, and go ahead and start painting. Okay, so now I'm thinking that the light is coming from about this direction, so I want to keep that in mind as I begin to paint. And we're just going to start painting in our shadows. Okay, now you do want to get somewhat refined at this step, because, and you know what, before I move on, I need to use a different brush. I'm going to use, I want this to look smooth, so let's try the charcoal block brush, see if that works. If not, we'll try something else. I'll bring the opacity down though, so it's not quite so bright, and I already don't like that. Let's try, let's just go with the regular old round brush actually. I think that will have to do. So you want to think about what direction the light's coming from, okay, and the forms and things like that as you do this step, because you want it to feel three-dimensional. Okay, so if the light's coming from that top left corner, then I need to light that accordingly with all my shadows and stuff like that. Okay, so that's what I'm thinking about as I do this. And you're probably going to want to zoom in and get pretty close on this part, because you want to be able to pick up on a lot of detail and start getting a little bit more specific. Okay. Okay. Inside his mouth, we're going to start over here getting underneath these horns. And you know what, we're actually going to leave these horns alone, because the way we're going to render them is going to be a little bit different than everything else. So we're going to end up doing those in their own separate layer, because we kind of want to bring a little bit of translucency to them. So I'm going to leave them alone for now, and we'll come back and work on them later towards the end. Let's come down here under his neck. Alright, I'm making sure I get each individual wrinkle and fold here, because I really want it to be able to have a lot of detail when we get to our final layer, and so I'm trying to get more and more refined with each passing layer here. Okay. Alright, we're going to come over here and get this shoulder part here. His fingers here. I'm going to get the detail in here, start to refine some of these shapes by punching in some of these shadows. It's looking good here. Alright, so time to move on to, let's see, what area do we want to work on next? Let's do this other arm down here before we forget about it. Okay, excellent. Where to next? Let's see, we got some spots here on his neck we can detail out a little bit more, I think. Push things a little bit darker here in his chest and stomach area and his neck. Okay, and probably down here a little bit more too. Okay, shadow from his arm onto his leg. Okay, bringing in these shadows here. Alright, so moving up on here to the shoulder. At least the shoulder of his wing joint. Alright, so I'm just filling in the shadow here under his wings, pushing that a little bit darker. Okay. On this other wing over here, we'll get a little bit of shadow underneath. Let's see, what else are we missing? The tail here. Need to fill that in. Alright, so there's a little bit more dimension and depth to his tail. We need to do, we're about done, we just need to do the log that he's on. So first we're going to start with the actual cast shadow from him standing on it. And then we can go ahead and come back and do any of the actual wood texture. Getting the log here. I'm thinking about it in large shapes first, and then going in and getting some of the smaller shapes and textures in afterwards. Alright, so first and foremost I'm thinking of it as a large cylinder, and then I can go in and define some of the smaller textures and shapes that are in there in the wood. Alright, so that looks good enough for the log. And just looking over this one more time, missed a few spots back here on this wing. See if there's anything else we need to get. Maybe a handful of these scales. We'll add some shadow onto the bottom edge. So I'm just touching the bottom of these scales to give them a little bit more form and depth. So they feel like there's a little bit of some three-dimensionality to them. Some of these scales back here on his back leg. Just touching some shadows on the bottom of those as well. It's not super dark either, right? I don't want these to be too prominent, but I do want them to have a little bit of a raised edge to them. So we're almost finished with these little scales here. There's a few here on his jaw that I want to get. And then a handful on his arm and his wing that we need to do. Then I'm going to just really quick take my smudge tool, and if I see any areas that I think are a little bit too refined or need to be softened down or blended a little bit, I can go back here really quick and redo those. So I'm over here with this vein on his neck. Maybe some of these areas in here that could be a little bit neater. Some of these areas down here under his face. Okay, blending some of these areas on his jaw. Just a few areas that are probably going to be focal points that we want to read a little bit smoother. Have just a little bit more blending to them. Alright, I think that looks good enough for this step. We got all of our rough shadows in, and if we flip that on and off, we can see kind of what that looks like before and after. It's starting to get a little bit of form to it, a little bit of depth, right? So the next step, we can go ahead and start adding our rough light. So, all right, so now we're ready to do our light layer. What we're going to do is create a new layer that's on top of our line art and everything else. We're going to leave it set to normal, and I'm going to go ahead and take the round brush, just a normal round brush, and adjust one of the settings here. I'm under the pencil tab, and I'm going to adjust the size so that I have the ability to get smaller and bigger the harder I push, okay? And then we're going to turn the opacity down just a little bit on it, okay? So have this brush now, and what we're going to do, we're going to, let's start over here on his eye, okay? We're going to color pick one area of this, and really quick, I'm going to also lower the opacity on that drawing layer a little bit. So we're going to color pick part of the eye, okay? And to do the highlight, all you're going to do is move the light a little bit warmer, because we're using a warm light source like the sun, and a little bit brighter, okay? And you're going to come in here and just go ahead and start painting in, oh, make sure you're on the right layer here, start painting in any light that would be here, okay? So, thinking about where the light source is coming from, where it would be hitting, and where the brightest spots are going to be. Thinking about the texture here, okay? And you're just going to come in and start painting all of that in. And if you need to, I'm even going to make this a little brighter. And every time you move to a new section, what you're going to want to do is repick your colors again, because you really want this to stay accurate. So under here, underneath his eye, I'm coming in and adding the highlights. And you can see I'm kind of breaking it up because I want it to feel like there's some texture going on. I don't want it to just be perfectly smooth. I'm also thinking now that there's actually going to be a little bit of a shadow underneath that eye there, so I'm not going to put a lot of light. Okay. But the top of all of these little bumps on his eye here, definitely want to bring those out. Okay. Just like this color. Warm and brighten things up a bit. Probably go even brighter there. The bottom edge of his mouth here, or the top edge, sorry. Really want that light to pick up there. Alright, looking good. Let's do some areas over here on his jaw. And this step is probably going to take a long time, right? Because we have to get in here and get all these details, but it's going to be worth it. Right, just go ahead and take your time and make sure everything is looking right. It looks good. Don't just try and rush through it to get it done. Okay. Let's go over here to the back of his head here. We can do this blue area. Let's move a little warmer, a little brighter. Alright, excellent. It's looking good. Let's move back over here to the front of his face. There's a few spots that I want to brighten up a little bit here on his mouth. Get a few of these scales here that could use a little bit of a brighter edge on top. Excellent. Let's move on up here to some of these spots on his head. So I'm going to color pick this. We're going to bring it warmer, brighter. And we'll just kind of have that fade out there. The brightest part is going to be right there at the top of the turning point of the ridge there. Same thing on this other side over here as well. And then up the middle ridge of his head. And then little bright spots on these little scales we got here. And at this point also, we should note that we are on a normal layer, and so you can start to kind of paint over some of the line here. Okay, because we do want to eventually have that covered up, so you can see I'm not being worried to cover that with our light layer. Okay. I'm still saving those horns. We're going to still do those on their very own separate layer, so don't worry about those for now. We will get them eventually, but for now we can go ahead and just sort of leave them where they are. Alright, so that's looking pretty good for the face. You can see we went along and got most of that stuff there lit up really nicely. And you're just going to have to go through the whole entire image and do the same thing. So that being said, let's go ahead and move on. Alright, so we're going to move on to some of these parts down here on his neck. So as usual, we move things warmer and a little brighter. And we just come in and start to paint in some of these details, some of the tips of these wrinkles and folds here, right, where they start to sort of catch the light. Constantly recolor picking to make sure that we're getting the right colors of the lighting, right? We still want it to feel real and accurate. Okay. So we keep making sure to do that. So warmer. Now, we went over warm and cools, but just to clarify what I mean by that, by warmer and cooler, I'm moving it closer towards the color of the light source, which happens to be warm, okay? So our light source is a yellowish color, and so whenever I make it a little warmer, I move it towards that yellow side of things. So whatever direction that is, that's just the direction it gets moved towards. That doesn't mean that it's going towards, it has to become yellow, right? You could see this is still green, but we just moved it closer towards yellow on the spectrum, okay? But that doesn't mean it has to be a yellow color in order to shade with it, right? Like right now we're shading with a green color, earlier we were shading with, or lighting with more of a brown color, right? So it doesn't have to be exactly whatever your light source is, okay? Because it's going to interact with the surface, the local color, to create a new color. Okay, your light source has to be really, really bright, and your surface has to be pretty reflective in order for it to just completely change to match the color of the light source. So what I'm doing here is just working in this lighting. It's a little bit green because I want it to be sort of reflective here. Okay. Some of these wrinkles here. Hitting the tops of some of these scales. I just bring out the light in them. Okay. Excellent. Hit some of these scales up here as well. It's excellent. I'm going to come back down a little bit closer towards yellow, even though it's already in the warm range, right? It's already a warm color, but I just wanted it to get closer to the color of what its light source is, which happens to be warm, so that we can begin to really get some of that feeling in there of the light actually bouncing off some of this stuff here. I'm kind of breaking up the lines a little bit too, so it's not so perfectly smooth. So we can get a little bit more texture in here. Excellent. Let's move on to his back here, with these scales. So these little tiny spikes that we did here, I'm also going to end up doing those on a separate layer. It'll just be easier to kind of get what we're looking for. So I'm ignoring those for now, but we will end up coming back to work on them. But for now, I'm not going to really worry too much about them. Just kind of painting over them like they aren't there. And then later we can sort of come back and fix that. I remember at this point, I'm okay to start painting over some of these lines as well. All right, starting to hit the top of some of these scales. Even kind of making some scales up as we go that we maybe didn't actually end up drawing in there the first time, but it would make sense for them to be there. We can just go ahead and light areas as if it was a scale, and then just end up coming back to shade it as necessary. Just moving along down his back here. And I haven't really picked a new color in a while because this is, for the most part so far, staying pretty much in the same range. So I don't really need to pick anything new quite yet. Excellent. Let's go ahead and scale that down for a second so we can look at it and make sure everything is working out all right. I'm actually going to take my airbrush and just sort of knock down the bottom edge of this a little bit. Okay. And then brighten up some of these scales here. These areas on his, like his shoulder area. Okay. We really want this part to be pretty bright as to how much light it's getting, which we still have other layers of light to do, so we don't need to get it all on the first pass, but I do want this to feel like it's coming out. There's a little bit more form there. Okay. All right, let's do let's do this hand down here. Bring my brush size down a little bit. Knocking in these little scales down here on his hands, his fingers. Okay. And then we can do his claws as well. Which actually, you know what? I keep forgetting we're going to also do those on a separate layer, so we don't have to worry about those for now. Oops. Let's move on over here. Some of these areas on his back I still think need to have a little bit more attention to them, so we're going to rework them some more. Okay. Start to hit some of these areas on his wings, or at least on the arms of his wings. Get this back here. And then we're going to catch just a little bit of that edge over there on this side as well. All right, perfect. Let's go ahead. Where do we want to move to next? You always want to kind of bring things back down for a minute to see how they're looking in the overall scheme of your lighting to make sure that you're not missing any parts that need to be lit a little better. So for example, I'm thinking that some of these areas down here just need a little bit more light to them, to the scales. So I'm going to do just that and sort of help pump things up. Okay. All right, that looks good. Let's go ahead and move on to this arm here. Warmer, brighter. And then down the center, we're going to have this really bright reflective highlight on these scales that we want to emphasize. And we have these little ridges that come along that we want to get as well. Painting over some more of the line art there. Down here on his foot now. Let's do this other foot while we're down here. And this part, I think I do need to knock back a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Where are we at now? Let's go ahead and work on, we have some areas in here we can lighten up. So let's do that. Alright, let's do the tops of his wings up here. And I guess I keep calling it a him. It could be a she. I just always see sharp, spiky stuff and I think that it's a boy. And do this top of this wing since it's the same color. A little yellower and a little brighter. Really want this part to be pretty bright, where it's really catching a lot of this light here. Make that more yellow, that a bit brighter. You want to try and get as close as you can with your colors on this layer, because you're not really going to want to go back and do too much adjustments with your layer settings. You can do maybe a little bit, but for the most part, your best bet's going to be to try and keep this as close to your first pass as possible so that everything looks accurate, right? Because it's everything specifically color picked in reference to another color that you put down. And if you're changing all of that, you run the risk of kind of messing up your palette and all that work you did. So you want to be a little careful when you do that. Make sure you're not taking things too drastically. But I mean, you can do it a little bit. Just be careful with it. That's all. Getting these wings in here. This green. All right, really pump that up there. Okay, I'm also going to use the same green up here on some of these parts on his back, just because I really like that color that it's given me. Alright, so we're almost done with the reptile. Let's go ahead and move on to his legs here. Let's go ahead and get that nice bright green saturated color. And you can start hitting some of these parts of his leg here. Alright, just knocking in these scales right here. Let's do these ones back here. This blue color. Saturate a little more. So even though you could see that we're painting with a green color, it makes it look like the blue is being hit with a yellow light. You're gonna knock him back just a little bit though. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit the... Oh, you know what? Before I forget, there's an area up here we need to get. So I'm going to get the bright green we were using earlier. And just hit that wing right there. Okay, there we go. Now we can come down. Let's do the tail. Bright green, move a little warmer, a little brighter. Let's hit a few of these scale tops here. That would be getting hit by the light as I start to round the edge a little bit. Okay, then we got this red area in here. We can brighten up. Awesome, so if we shrink that down nice and small, we should be able to get a pretty good idea of what it's looking like so far. Okay. And we're going to do just a little bit of adjustment here. That's a little bit too bright. Mess with the saturation just a tiny bit. Bring up the brightness just a little bit as well. Okay. So you can see how big of a difference already that's making. And there are a few parts that I want to knock back a little bit that maybe are just a little bit too bright. I think that helps make it look a little better. And then now we just have to do the log real quick. So let's do that. This part in the end is going to end up being out of focus, so I'm not going to spend too much time really rendering this to look super nice or anything like that, because like I said, we won't really be able to see a lot of it by the time it's finished. The final image is done. So I will do some though. We do still want it to, even if it's out of focus, it still needs to kind of read as being lit. So we'll still do the log here real quick. There we go. So that looks pretty good for our light layer. I'm happy with it. Turned out nicely. I am going to really quick over here though. I see some shadows that I want to adjust just a little bit. So for example, some of these areas over here on his eye I think go a little too dark. So I'm just going to clean them up a little bit, erase them out, and then let's come back to our light layer. And I want to push a little bit more highlights in here and maybe soften up that real hard edge there just a little bit. Okay, there we go. Fantastic. That looks really great. And let's do one quick pass again just to make sure we got everything that we wanted to get, that everything's lit correctly. And we'll shrink it down for a minute. Make sure it's reading well, like it has some form there. I do think while we're here, let's go to our multiply layer. We're going to set this to normal really quick so we can color pick what we need. Let's find a nice, good, deep spot here because we want to go back and add a few shadows really quick. So, for example, under here in his belly really needs to be pushed quite a bit darker. Okay. As well as some of these spots under here, I think. Maybe not so much under his chin. We can probably leave that a little bit lighter than there. I think definitely over here some more. It could go a little darker. All right. Perfect. So there we go. That's it for this lecture. I'll see you guys in the next one.
All right, so now we're ready to move on to our deep shadows, okay? So what we're gonna do is make a new layer. We'll go ahead and put this on top of our multiply layer, but beneath our light layer. We're also going to take our drawing layer and lower the opacity way down because we really wanna start to use our values to suggest the form instead of the line art, okay? So I'm gonna bring that way down so you can barely see it, and we're gonna start to use some shadows here to sort of knock things back more, okay? So the way we're gonna do this, we're gonna keep this on normal layer so that we can start to paint over some stuff. And we're just going to darken the colors and move them a little bit cooler, which is the opposite of what we were doing last time. And we're gonna do this, and actually, you know what? We want this on top of our light layer. I forgot. We wanna build up these layers like that. So put it on top and just go ahead and start darkening things. Okay, and we're going to use this value to really start to define form more, okay? So for this part down here, for example, we're going to move that a little darker, a little cooler. Okay, really start getting some of these forms in here. Pushing some of these areas really quite a bit darker. Some of them might even be almost black, like some of the his ear hole, for example, will get pretty dark. Just really trying to help increase our overall value range. Because right now it's not super, could be a little bit broader. Okay. Any ambient occlusion as well, parts that really just need to get pushed way darker. Okay. Some of these spots underneath here under his chin. Go ahead and take that. Actually, want to go this way with it. Darken it up some more. Hit some of these neck folds and really push them a little darker. A little deeper there to get in some of these folds underneath here. Okay, excellent. Some of these areas here we need to push a little darker. We just want to push those shadows back, really help define those edges a little bit more. Okay. Let's see, where else? Probably a little bit here underneath the horn. Shadow could go a little darker there. Okay. Let's see. Let's go underneath this wrinkle sort of fold shape here, a little darker. A couple of these scales could go just a tad bit darker. Some of these wrinkles, they help push it back some more. Okay. Over here in his armpit area, there's a couple spots that could be pushed a little bit deeper. While it's back here, we'll push those shadows a little darker there. Okay. Down here, we kind of lost some of our folds in the skin. So let's go ahead and bring that back in and add a little bit more detail to it. Well as under here. Okay, working in here on some of his finger edges. We're trying to clean up and define some of these shapes down here that have gotten a little messy. Let's do this other hand as well. Some of these shadows here a little darker along the edge of the wood. Over here as well. Okay. Awesome. Maybe a few areas over here that could go a little darker. And maybe just a little bit on a couple of these scales here that we want to help define just a tad bit more. Might be a little too much on some of those. Some of these areas really help define the form here. All right, so there we go. I think that's looking pretty good for our deep shadows. Let's go ahead and do a few spots over here on the tree that really need to be pushed a little darker. Really push this part underneath where he's sitting on the log. We want that to really fall into shadow down there. And while we do this, we can kind of use that to clean up some of this light and stuff going on here. Okay. And then this last part over here. All right, fantastic. So that's our deep shadow layer. We can move on to the next layer. All right, so now we're ready to do our highlights layer. So we're gonna make a new layer. It's gonna be set on top of everything else. We're gonna leave it on normal. And I'm actually going to use the fat pencil brush, which is just, all it is a modified technical pencil that has the max width increased. Okay, that's all that is. So we have a new layer here, and what we're going to do, the same thing as before, only this time we're going to go even brighter with these, and a little bit warmer still. And these are going to be the layers that are our brightest highlights, right? These are the areas where the light is really just reflecting right off of the surface and creating this really bright light setup, okay? Now in this layer especially, you want to break this up with texture, because that's where we read most of the texture in an object, is in the highlights, right? Where however the light kind of breaks up on that surface is kind of how our eye interprets whatever it is that we're looking at. And if it just looks, really smooth, we have some really smooth glossy sort of highlights, then it's going to send the message that the surface is really smooth and glossy, which in this case it's not. So we want to make sure that we're really trying to light that accordingly so that people aren't getting that impression. Okay. You can see here I'm trying to break it up a little bit as we go along. Here along his eye. His eye we're going to do on a separate layer along with his claws and horns and stuff. His actual eyeball, the little tiny part in the middle. So for now I'm just going to leave it be. Not worry about that too much. You can see this is really the layer where things start to kind of come alive, in my opinion. It starts to feel a lot more real. And it's kind of where you start getting the detail, because even though the rest of this looks pretty painterly, it's this layer where we have this little tiny bits of texture that really starts to make things feel like there's a lot of detail going on, even though it's really fairly simple as far as painting goes, what we're doing here, but it definitely takes it to another level just by breaking things up a little bit, giving it a little bit of texture in there. Few areas on the jaw here. I'm not really changing this one that much with my color picker because it's kind of the brightest we're going to be going, right? It's not really not affected by hue that much because it's kind of our brightest point. So I'm not too worried about that. So you can go ahead and zoom in and out just to check from a distance, see how well things are looking. Excellent. Let's move on down here to his arm. And I'm trying to still decide if I want the scales to be really shiny or if I want them to be a little bit more matte and kind of have the skin beneath and next to the scales be shiny. I'm not 100% sure what it is we want to go with. I think we're going to go with the scales being kind of shiny. Okay, I'm going to get my airbrush tool and just soften these up a little bit. I think what we need to do also, it's just a little too bright, so you know what, let's just lower the opacity on the brush actually. There we go.
Catch a few spots on some of these scales here. These wrinkles. All right, and then up here on his neck. All right, excellent. That really starts to give him some pretty cool sort of glossy effect. In some parts, we don't want to do that on all the parts, but just on some of these scales so they feel a little bit more shiny. And even still, I don't know if I want them that glossy, so I'm just going to break them up with a little bit of texture. I'll zoom in more so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. The reason I zoom out so much and work like this is because it gives me a better idea of the overall image and what it's looking like from a distance instead of getting so caught up and focused on one little detailed area. I want to be able to focus on the whole and not just one spot. Coming down here on his arm. Okay, his little fingers here. Let's see, whoops, where else do we need to hit it? Let's do, I think we need a little bit more on this back part of his head. Just a touch. Okay, and a little bit more right here as well. Okay, excellent. And this front part, I want it to be pretty bright, like that. There we go. Really liking that a lot. Okay. Excellent. Catch a few spots down in here. Over here on the top of his claws on his hand. Over here along his wing. Top of this ridge as well. You want to blow out those highlights there a little bit. Okay. You can see that as I go, I'm also painting over some of these lines because eventually we just want to be able to turn off the line art and have the rest of this still kind of stand up on its own. Okay. Get a few spots over here in his leg. Get the airbrush and pull that back just a touch. Okay, and do the same thing down here on his hand too. A little bit too strong. There we go. Okay, hit a few of these spots down here on his tail. All right, awesome. I still think we'd maybe need a few more spots over here on some of these scales on his leg. Okay, that looks better. All right, and perhaps just a little bit more over here on his hand. Okay, excellent. Perfect. So I think that looks pretty good. We can turn that on and off and see the difference it makes. If you think you did yours too bright, you can always lower the opacity a little bit.
Okay. And there you go. So that's it for our highlights.
All right, so in this lecture, we're going to be going over how to add the colors and patterns. So what we're going to do is have a new layer on top of everything else. We're going to set this to multiply, which you can see I've already done here. And you can use whatever brush you want. I'm going to use this charcoal block brush because I like the texture. And I'm going to have the opacity all the way up. And the brush size I'll be adjusting as I go. But I'm going to start with about right here. And I have this bright pinkish red color picked. And you can start wherever you want. I'm going to start right here on his back. And I'm just going to start adding some markings as I go. Okay? Some different patterns that we might find on him, because we don't just want him to be these, flat gradients of colors from green to blue to red. A lot of animals have markings, and especially something like a chameleon, it's going to have a lot of types of markings. So I recommend looking at reference photos to make sure that you can get something that looks good. I've studied a lot of animals and drawn a lot of animals throughout my career, and so I kind of have built up a visual library. Even still though, sometimes if I'm doing something that I've never done before or it's not quite looking right, I'll still go and get some more reference. So it never hurts. Never hurts to have reference. I would recommend looking up. I'm taking inspiration from all sorts of different things, from lizards and reptiles to crustaceans and insects, right? Anything and everything is free game. So go look and find and explore. There's lots of cool stuff, especially underwater creatures like fish and crabs and shrimp and stuff like that. They have some really cool patterns that make your drawings or make your creatures and your paintings, can make them look really interesting. So go see what's out there, explore, experiment. Okay. So I'm just starting up here along his back, adding in a little touch of red on some of these scales. Okay. Bring our brush size down a little bit as we get into these smaller areas. Bring it back up, come back up here. I'm up here on his wing now. Let's do the other side. Okay, excellent. Let's go ahead and move to, let's do some areas over here on his arm. Hopefully I don't sound too stuffed up. I have a little bit of a cold. I apologize for that. Okay. You know what? I'm going to actually, let's see, how do we want to do this? Bring my brush size up a little bit. So I'm just working my way around, making sure I'm keeping things pretty consistent. Okay. Do you want any on his feet? Maybe it's all red and then it turns green. No, we're gonna keep his feet green, but we can throw some down on this leg a little bit. And you can see, since we have it on this multiply layer, it's interacting appropriately with all the lighting that we've already put down. It's lighter in the light places and gets hit with the highlights, and it's also darker in the shadow places, which is exactly what we wanted. Okay. Just experimenting with some areas under his neck. Seeing if we want to maybe brighten any of it up or just leave it. We might come back and do that. We'll save that for the end once we've done the rest of these stripes on him. Okay. Experimenting with some different things, trying to decide if I just want to do the classic sort of chameleon look or maybe something a little different. And I think we're Just gonna go with the classic chameleon there. Okay. Get my airbrush here and just brush some of this back a little bit. Okay. All right, then let's come up here. I'm trying to decide if I want to do stripes that kind of run along like this, because I think that looks pretty cool, or if we want to do more like this. Maybe we're gonna go with the first one. So have him fade in down there from his nose area. Let's make these a little smaller actually. They're still too big, I think. Something about like that looks a little better. Really quick, I'm going to go down to my color layer and I'm going to really lighten and brighten up this area on the back of his head and have it kind of fade to like a white, yellow. Now let's try, still want it a little bit greener, just like a lighter green maybe. Not that light though. Maybe we should just leave. Well, let's do this. Let's color pick it. That will give us a little bit closer to what we're looking for, I think. It's got a little bit more saturated. Like that a little better, I think. Okay. And I'm just going to break up this a little bit so it's not quite so smooth. Might just need to repaint it. I just want it to be a little, let's just try knocking it back a little bit maybe first. It's not so strong. That's better. Okay, let's come, I'm gonna turn this back to normal just for a second so I can pick that color again and make sure I have the exact same color as before. Turn that back to multiply. And let's move on down here to his leg, his back leg. Let's go ahead, I'm gonna pick a different color now. I'm gonna go with a purple and I'm gonna make it a little lighter. And this is what we're gonna use. Let's try it first actually. See if this is what we wanna do in the, yeah, we're gonna use this purple color for the bluer, more blue parts of his body. Okay. All right. Coming up here on his scales here. Notice that I'm not making these super, crisp, sharp shapes, right? They have some smudge to them and they're not all perfect because that's a lot more accurate to how it is in the real world. If you have these really too crisp, too clean of shapes, it can start to kind of make it look almost like maybe like a tattoo instead of like markings on an animal. So just keep that in mind. Think about the edge quality of it and how sharp those edges are going to be and what that's going to look like to the viewer. Start working my way down his tail here. Adding some stripes in. Alright, and then perhaps just a little bit on his nose here. Let's see how that looks. Might end up actually liking it a little better without that. Alright, it's looking pretty good. We're gonna do a few spots under here in the wings. Okay, and then we'll do, let's do the top of the wings as well. And then I think we'll be about done. We're probably going to adjust some of the settings a little bit here and see if we can get it perfectly balanced exactly where we want it. So let's finish this up really quick so we can get to that. Trying to decide which way I want the stripes to go, or if I even really want stripes. This almost makes them look like Christmassy when we do this. But let's see, let's finish it up really quick and then we can maybe erase it away a little bit. Get back our purple as well and add a little bit of that in there. Alright, let me get my airbrush and knock it back up here just a little bit. There we go. Perfect. Alright, so now I'm going to take this whole layer. We're going to see if we need to lower the opacity or maybe lower the saturation just a bit, which I think we might need to do. It's pretty pumped up right now. We can adjust this around, see if we want to change any of the hue on anything, but I don't really want to. I think I picked the colors I liked right there off the bat. Okay. And we'll just go ahead and lower the opacity just enough. Don't want to do too much, but just a little bit there. Okay. And there we go. We have our markings. I'll see you guys in the next lecture.
All right. So next, we're going to go ahead and add a secondary light source as well as our reflected light. We're going to make a new layer on top of everything else. This layer is going to be set to normal. And I'm going to stick with this charcoal block brush for now. And we're going to add this in here. So what reflected light is when light is coming down, right? It's bouncing off of this log here, or whatever's going to be in the background, like some jungle leaves, and that light is going to lose most of its power, but some of it, about 10% of that light, is going to bounce back off and be reflected onto another surface. So for example, when the light comes down here to this log, let's get a different color so you can see what I'm talking about. When this light comes down, it's going to bounce off and hit the underside of our dragon, for example, or the light coming down to the leaves under here is going to bounce off and hit the underside of our log. Okay, so we need to add that. It's really going to help add a lot of realism and depth and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and jump right in. I'm going to start with his underside, and to do this, I'm going to select the color under there, and I'm going to move it a little bit warmer, closer to the log color, because that's what the reflected light's going to be, and a little bit lighter, a little bit more. Okay, and we can come in here and just start painting that in. Now, the closer that's maybe a little bit too bright actually. The closer it is to the log, the brighter that reflected light is going to be. Okay? In some places where there's not a lot of light reflecting, there won't be any reflected light. So we want to keep that in mind as well. Okay? And I'm also, you can notice, getting a few more of these folds here, because there are multiple flaps of skin that are going to be getting lit. You know what? Let's go with a different brush. let's try the fat pencil brush, see how that does. I just want the texture to be a bit smoother as it comes down. Yeah, that's better. And I think that's a little bit too much, so I'm gonna bring some green up in here for some of these areas down here where it might be getting hit with the forest. Okay. Do the same thing under here on his jaw. Just come up here and move it a little bit greener because a lot of this is going to be, you know, jungle stuff that's being reflected here. We'll put some of that green down there in his jaw as well. Okay, let's do this leg, his back leg. The underside of that leg as well. Under this leg, let's go a little brighter. Okay. And I'll probably come back and knock some of this back as well. This isn't all quite final yet. Let's do the underside of the log here. Okay. Go ahead and take my soft airbrush and knock all that back just a little bit. Okay. Let's go ahead and do under his tail here. Let's do up here on his wings. Alright, that looks pretty good. Now let's do our secondary light source. I'm going to just adjust this a little bit, see if we need to maybe brighten it up a little bit, lower the saturation. Okay. And then let's go ahead and do our secondary light source. I'm going to do the same thing, new layer, and I want this is going to be pretty freaking bright here. And I'm going to do a blue, because our main light is going to be a warm, like it's the sun. So I want this one to be a lot cooler. It's a little bit too bright. Make it a little more darker and a little more saturated. A little brighter than that. Alright, right about there I think is good. And I'm imagining it's coming from right over here off screen. Okay, because I want to light up some of these areas that are over here in the shadows. Okay. So that's what I'm going to do. And the reason why I'm using it completely opaque and just painting over everything I already did on these areas because I want it to feel like a very bright, strong light source that's just sort of lighting the rim of my creature here. And I'm also going to have to make sure that I do this on, well, one, I'm going to have to get all these little textures in here, but I'm also going to have to make sure I do it on the log and all of the area surrounding it. Underside of the wing here. Okay, get these wrinkles here. Back of his leg. Okay. We got the log in here. And his tail for the most part. Let's go ahead and just finish it down here some. Alright, excellent. Just touch up a few more spots that seem like they would be hitting just a little bit of light there. And we'll see if we need to touch anything else up. I think looks pretty good. Okay. Excellent. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead. We're going to use our slider here. I think we need to make it just a little bit brighter because some parts it just starts to blend in a little bit too much. And we'll bring the saturation up as well. Slide that around until it looks about right. All right, excellent. You can really start to see how it's picking up some form here. You can lower the opacity if you need to, but I'm going to lower it just a little bit, and then let's go back really quick to our reflected light layer. And I'm just going to erase away some areas that are maybe a little bit too strong. Okay, like his shoulder here, that's a little bit too much. We do want some, but not, we don't want to go crazy. Okay. Some of these spots here under his neck. Okay, maybe his tail a little bit too much. And I actually want to go back on his neck and add a few more spots of this reflected light. All right, there we go. Fantastic. So I think we can call that good. Let me go on my reflected light layer as well really quick, and I'm going to brush out a few spots that are a little bit too strong, a little too bright. Just tone some things down just a little bit. All right, there we go. That's our reflected light and our secondary light source layers. All right, so the next step we need to do is going to be to add a background and then also clean up the edges of our creature here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, insert a photo, and I'm just going to take this photo of a jungle here. Okay, and I'm going to blow it up, and we're going to make sure that this is on, well, first let's do this. Let's make sure it's on the lowest layer here because it's going to be our background behind everything else. Okay, and we're going to blow this up. Now, there's a few things I want to think about here, okay? One is going to be the contrast, right? We want this creature to stand out against its background, okay? And in order to do that, we need to make sure that there's not anything behind it that's going to become too distracting, right? So, right off the bat, what I'm going to go ahead and do is Gaussian blur this whole entire layer, and it will help make it look like it's out of focus, okay? Now you can see, there's a couple things I did here. Over here on the right, I'm gonna make a new layer so I can draw and point to you what I'm talking about. So over here on the right side of the image, what I did was make sure that this whole area here was really dark because I wanted it to contrast against the rim lighting we did right here so it will show up brighter, right? So all of this I did pretty dark, okay? And there's this line of darkness that goes along here that contrasts with his face so that we can really see and, you know, get a clear image of the outline and the silhouette. Okay. Now, what I want to do also is adjust the hue and saturation and color because the thing is we want the lighting that we did on our creature to match the lighting in the scene. And right now the lighting on our background looks really cool and really dark, and we need to feel a little bit more warm. Okay. So what we can do is go ahead and adjust this slider here until we get somewhere. Let's make sure we're on the right layer. Down here, there's what we want. We can adjust this slider to bring it a little bit more into the warm realm right there. Okay. Then I'm going to lower the saturation as well just a little bit so it's not quite so in your face. We don't want it to be the focal point. Then what I can do, if I come here to curves and I want to just lower the contrast overall, I can bring the brights down. So the brightest brights will be a little bit darker and the darkest darks will be a little bit lighter if we adjust this one down here, okay? Just so there's not as much contrast. So we want it to fade into the background. So next what we can do is, in order to kind of balance that out because it looks a little bit too like light now, you know, a little bit faded. What we can do is darken the brightness and up the saturation just a little bit, okay? And that will give us a pretty good sense of what we're looking for, okay? Now, what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna come in here with a new layer, set this to overlay, and I'm gonna come in here manually and adjust some of this stuff, okay? So, let's see, I'm going to get a nice big soft airbrush, and I'm going to pick a dark blue sort of color. And because this side over here is where this sort of blue light is coming from, I want there to be a little bit of a blue cast to it, okay? And then just darken up some of these areas as well where I really want there to be some contrast showing through. Okay, then we'll come up here and pick a nice orange color and lighten up some of the areas over here on the opposite side. Okay, bring them a little bit warmer. Okay, and then we can adjust that, turn it on and off to find the balance we want. So right now, I think that looks good. Okay, now what we need to do, okay, so I went ahead and duplicated the image, and on mine I merged my overlay and my background layer together, but when I try and merge these together, it's giving me problems for some reason. I haven't been able to figure out why. Normally it doesn't do this, so I had to do a little bit of a workaround. So what I'm going to do is turn off the background layer and the background color all together so we just have this shape. Then what I can go ahead and do is save this as a PNG, which will save it with a transparent background, and I'll just save it to my photos. Okay. Then if I come over here and I insert a photo, I can insert everything but the background on its own separate layer and preserve everything. So I'll show you what I mean. For example, if I merge all these back together and we turn it on and off, that's the difference. Some of the shadows weren't getting all the way dark for some reason, and I couldn't quite figure out why. So that's one way to work around it. If it works for you, just merge them all together. Normally it does. I'm not sure why it was doing that, but it was. So anyways, now we have this background layer here, and what we're going to do, we can turn that back on, and we want to come around with our eraser tool. I'm going to get a medium brush eraser tool, and we're just going to clean up the edges on this so that we can get it ready to go add the textures, right? So there's some areas, for example, where maybe it's just not quite, you know, clean, crisp line, and you don't want it to be too clean and too crisp, which is why I'm using a medium airbrush. If you do it too crisp, it's going to look fake. Okay, so you do want to make sure you're doing that, and you can see I'm not quite making it a perfectly straight, smooth line. It's a little bit broken up in areas. Okay, just making sure that everything is all, like you can see here, some of the patterns were starting to go outside the lines. Now you can do this, you can prevent all of this by just creating either a layer mask or, you know, making sure you don't go outside the lines by selecting the shape whenever you paint. However, for this style, I like to make sure that everything looks nice and organic. And sometimes when you do that, it can get a little bit too crisp on the edges and start to look fake. So that's why I didn't do that, and I'm just going back now to clean it up and erase it. Now a lot of this isn't that big of a deal because we're going to end up going back anyways and using our blur tool to kind of blur it out of focus. But nevertheless, it's important to pay attention to the details, and we're not quite sure where we're going to be blurring yet, so it's best to make sure everything is nice and crisp just in case we decide to keep it that way. Okay. Get our brush size down nice and small so we can get in here and get all these shapes. Like these claws, for example. Make sure those are feeling nice and crisp with that highlight sitting there right on top. Okay. This side looks pretty good. Got some areas right here we need to clean up just a little bit. For the most part though, it's looking pretty good. Let's get the tail here. Come up that brush size some. Okay. Excellent. And I'm going to come in here as well and open that up a little bit. Okay, and we're still going to come back, by the way, and do his eyes and his horns and claws and stuff on a separate layer. So don't think we forgot about those. We're just going to wait till we put the texture on first so we don't have to paint it over twice. All right, there we go. So that looks pretty good. I think it's nice and clean, crisp edges. We can turn it on and off and see just the background and just the painting. So you can see it's really starting to come together now, and now we get to add some of the final finishing touches that are really going to bring this to life. So,
all right, so next what we're going to need to do is add some photo textures, and this is going to really help bring it into the realm of reality because we're taking textures from actual photographs of real life things and incorporating it into our picture, okay? So you can see I have brought up here this chameleon, and we're going to use, and I have a bunch of photos as well, I should mention, okay, that I've brought into Photoshop. So I am in Photoshop now. If you don't have Photoshop, it's going to be difficult to do this in Procreate because there's not a warp feature, but this is just kind of like a finishing touch. So we are here in Photoshop, and the first thing that we need to do, we're going to place this up here for a second, is get our lasso tool, and we're going to select an area here for the eye. So I'm going to use my lasso tool and circle this whole thing here. You know what? Let's try that again. I want to get a little bit wider area around the eye. All right. Now we can take our move tool and just bring this right in here. Okay, perfect. So now what we can do, we're going to go ahead and lower the opacity. We want to bring it down to about around 30 to 40%, somewhere in there. Okay. And you can see I just imported this whole thing as a Photoshop document. So I have my creature and my background layer, and those are the only two layers I have. So on top of this is where we're going to be doing our texture. So I have this. We can go ahead, let's zoom in on this right here so you can see what we're doing a little better. Okay, we're going to come up here to image, and we're going to go to adjustments and click on exposure. Okay, and we're going to adjust this. If we bring the gamma up, it'll increase our contrast a little bit more. Okay, and bring up the exposure a little bit. Oh, a little bit too far there. We just want it a little tiny bit. Okay. Bring the gamma down just a little bit more. All right, perfect. Okay, and then let's go ahead and get our warp tool. So if we come to image, where is it? Let's find it really quick. Actually, sorry, edit. I apologize. It's under edit, transform, and warp. Okay, this is going to allow us to move this around to get it to match what we already have here, okay? Which is what we want to do. We're going to keep it as a sphere like it is already, but we're just going to move this around till it looks about right. We don't want to warp it too much because it is supposed to still look like a sphere. Okay. And also on top of that, we can go ahead, let's go ahead and accept that. We're going to come to our adjustments and go to brightness and contrast. Or sorry, whoops. I'm going to go to adjustments and do hue and saturation. Okay. And lower the saturation a little bit because we don't want it to adjust the colors we already put on. We just want it to interact with it. Okay. So adjust that just a little bit, bring up the lightness just a little bit. Okay, and then we can lower the opacity a little bit more. You just want to adjust all these settings till it looks about right where you want it. Okay, so I'm bringing the saturation down, and then we're going to adjust the gamma one more time using the exposure. I'll bring that up a little bit just so our darks get a little bit darker in there. Okay, now we have all these kind of rough edges around it that we want to take care of. So all we have to do is come over to our eraser tool, and I have a soft brush selected, okay, and I'm just going around the edge here and cleaning up that hard edge so it looks nice and smooth. Okay, perfect. So now when we zoom out, you can see what that looks like. And it looks pretty good. Okay. Now, you're gonna need to do that all over the entire thing. So let's look at some other areas that we want to add texture to. So let's go with this here really quick. We're gonna get our lasso tool, take a big section here, and we'll drag that over. Okay, go ahead and drop it in. Perfect. So same process, we're going to lower the opacity. Okay, we're gonna come up to adjustments, exposure. We're gonna bring the gamma up and the exposure up just a little bit, not too much. Okay, and then let's get our warp tool. So under edit, transform, warp. And this is going to be for his neck. Now we're warping this so that it will sort of fit and follow the wrinkles and folds that we've already put into the skin, right? That's what we're trying to accomplish here, okay? And so we're wanting this to look like it's part of it. It's not just sitting on top, right? Because if it just looks like it's sitting on top, it's not really going to make a lot of sense, and it's going to kind of look weird, right? Which is why we have to do this in Photoshop, because of this specific part. Because otherwise, what tends to happen is it just kind of looks like an overlay. It doesn't really fit in. And after we do this, we're going to have to go back again still and really work in the highlights back into these photo textures, okay? So this one is just elephant skin that I found. And it's definitely going to take you some time. You just have to go over this whole image like this. Actually, sorry, let me correct that. Not the whole image, and I'll explain why in a second. But let's go ahead and place that down and adjust the opacity some more. And the exposure a little bit more. Okay. And then I think that looks about good. Let's go ahead and get our eraser tool and clean up these edges. So, like I said, the reason that we aren't going to do the entire image is because by the time we're done, we're going to use some photo effects to make it look like this is kind of out of focus in some areas with a little bit of a depth of field like you might have in a photograph of something that's taken very close up. And so because of that, we're not going to spend a bunch of time on every single area because a lot of it is going to be blurred and out of focus. So we're going to focus on the areas that are our main focal point. So that's going to be mostly the front half of his body, and especially his face area is where we're really going to make sure we get these textures in here and that they look good. Okay, so there's our next layer. Let's go ahead and move on to the next one. We're going to do some areas on his jaw. So I think I'm going to go with this one for his jaw area. So we will get our lasso tool here. Grab that, bring it into our image, drop it in right there. Okay, now we can go ahead and rotate this so it fits more with the area and shape that we want. Okay, we're gonna bring the opacity down as normal. Excellent. Come up here for this one, let's go ahead and place that. All right, so for this one, we're going to also need to adjust the hue and saturation because we don't want it to, we'll turn it to more green, which is where we're at, and then just bring down the saturation so it's not competing as much. Then we're gonna come back to our adjustments. We're gonna go to the exposure again, bring up the gamma and the exposure just a little bit. Okay. And let's bring up the opacity just a little bit more as well. Okay. And bring up the exposure just a tiny bit. Okay, go ahead and get our warp tool, which is under Edit, Transform, and Warp. I know that I'm going a little bit fast on this, but since I'm doing it a whole bunch, I don't want to take too long. So hopefully I'm going to be doing it a bunch of times, so you'll pick up on it as I do. You'll get the hang of what I'm doing here. So go ahead and adjust this to fit. Blow this side up back here. So I want those scales to get pretty big. They'll get a bit smaller right along that bottom there. Okay. All right, let's give that a shot and see if we can get that to look good. So go ahead and get our eraser tool, and we'll blow that up a little bit. Oops, that's the wrong tool. Let's go ahead and do that. And we want, there we go, there's our eraser tool. Go along the bottom there. And then up here as well. Okay, and then I'm gonna bring the opacity down just a little bit more. And we'll adjust the exposure one more time. We're gonna bring the gamma up, so it's just a bit darker in those crevices. There we go. Perfect. And then on, let's see, this layer, I'm gonna lower the opacity on that just a little bit as well. It's coming in a little bit too strong. Right about there looks good. All right. Excellent. Let's move on to some more areas on the front of his face. We're gonna try, let's go with this piece here. I think looks good. And we're gonna go ahead and select our lasso tool. I'm gonna go with this area right up here. Okay, we'll drag that over. If we can get it to select up here. Okay. Rotate that. There we go. Let's bring that opacity down. Okay. Place that. Image, adjustments, exposure. Bring that gamma up. And the exposure. There's not a set number or spot you need to do this to, but it's kind of something you have to do by eye and just see what looks good through sort of trial and error. Okay, go ahead and we're gonna bring down the saturation so we're not competing with our previous colors. And let's go ahead and get that transform, edit, transform, warp. All right, we'll go ahead and place that. Grab our eraser. And we're just gonna go ahead and repeat this process over the entire thing. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and speed it up so you don't have to just sit here and watch the whole thing. But yeah, when we get to the horns, I'll go ahead and stop and we'll show you what we're gonna do with that. So enjoy. All right, so before we go too much further, let's go ahead and do these horns, okay? Now, I'm actually going to just use these horns here because, well, they already look perfect and they're exactly what we need. And we will paint over them after we place them, but for now, this is going to be a lot faster than having to paint all these ridges, okay? This is a technique that's called photo bashing, and this isn't really hardcore 100% photo bashing since we painted almost the whole thing. We're only using a little bit of it, but this is a technique that's pretty common, especially in concept art and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and make sure we have this placed around where we want it. Okay. And for now, I'm going to lower the opacity so we can see a little bit better what we're doing. And then I'm going to hit our transform tool. And we are going to put this in where we want it to be. So, let's see if that's too warped. That looks not too bad. Let's go with that. Go ahead and get our eraser. And once again, I'm not super worried about these end details here because this is going to be out of focus, the tip of the horn here. And then we're going to go ahead and come down here to this layer so that we can erase out that horn that's there underneath, the original one. And come back up here. Let's find our, there we go. All right, there we go. And we're going to be able to come back in and paint into this more so it doesn't quite look so fake. Okay, and we're going to actually have to do that with all of these textures, but I just want to point that out because I'm aware that it looks a little weird right now, but that's okay. So let's do the bottom horn. I'm going to use this one here. Okay, lower the opacity on that guy as well just a bit. Okay, get our eraser tool. Alright, so there we go. That looks good enough for the textures. Like I said, we'll be able to come back in and adjust it. I do want to fix just a few more spots over here on his face. And then, what's that layer? We want this layer. Some areas here that I need to pull back just a bit as well. There we go. Okay. Excellent. Let's go ahead and move on to this arm over here. So I'm gonna go with we actually have some wrinkles that we can work with. So let's go with this area here. I'll use these for the wrinkles on his arm. Alright, we're going to take this same selection here that we already used and we're going to use it again on his arm here. But it's going to be a bit smaller this time. So looking at these, I decided it's going to be a little bit harder to get it to fit the value range as everything else. So I'm going to go ahead and delete them, and we're going to redo the horns here in a minute. But it's really important that when you're doing photo textures that you really take the time and effort to make sure that nothing looks like it's sticking out blatantly, right? Everything needs to really sort of blend into one coherent piece. And if there's one spot that really stands out more than the rest, it can really destroy the illusion of the whole image. So I took that part out, and we're gonna have to go back and do it again. But first, we're gonna just finish up a few more parts here. I'm gonna do a few areas on his feet, and then we're gonna do the log, and we'll finish up with the horns last. Okay, so let's go ahead and finish up the feet area. You'd be surprised what you can use to texture things. All right, now let's go ahead and add. The bark, the tree bark, and I got a couple pieces here. Oh, and I forgot we have this guy. We might go back and use some of him some more somewhere. We'll see. But yeah, let's go with the bark. We got these two here to work with. So I'm just gonna come in here and grab a section. All right, so that looks pretty good for the log. And I'm gonna just lower the opacity on it a little bit more. Okay. And now let's see if we can get these horns right again. Let's see, what angle are we getting these at? We have these horns, or these ones. That's a little bit more accurate to the angle that we have, and that's what we have to work with, it looks like. So the only problem is that those are really bright and blown out. Those are pretty bright too, though. Let's try it. Let's try this and see what we can make happen. You know what? No, I can already tell we're gonna have to go with these ones. And if we really can't get it to work for some reason, that's not a big deal. We can always just paint it ourselves. So let's at least give it a crack. All right, so I'm gonna start with the bottom one this time. Now the first thing that we're gonna need to do, and maybe we just want one horn. Now that'll make it look like he has like a weird nose. We don't want that. So what we're gonna need to do is, first off, let's actually go ahead and clean up the edges a little bit more. Okay, so come in here, go ahead and grab our lasso tool. And we're gonna do our best. Let's use our magnetic lasso tool. So if you hold down the lasso tool, you'll be able to select magnetic, and this will just follow along the edge of whatever it is you're trying to select, which makes it a lot easier. And if you ever need to place a point, you can just click and it will put an anchor down for you. All right, here we go. And we're gonna inverse, oops, not that. We want to inverse our selection. So Shift Command I will inverse that for you. Did it work? Let's find out. Doesn't look like it did. Nope. Shift Command I. There we go. All right, and then we can go ahead and just erase away the rest of that, or I believe just hit delete. There we go. So now we can unselect that, and that will give us just our horn. Now, the problem is that it's way too bright. So we're gonna come down here to brightness and contrast. Go lower the brightness some. Keep the contrast not too crazy. Okay. And we're going to need to adjust the curves here. So we're going to make it so our darks aren't quite so dark, and that our lights are a little bit darker so they're not quite so bright. And that should help it fit in a lot more. Now we want to do a warp because we want this to be a little bit straighter here. And then let's go ahead with, I'm gonna select perspective warp, I believe is what we want. Nope. We want free transform, there we go. And that should allow us to, all right, there we go. So if you hold Command, you can do this, which will allow you to sort of freely move it around, which will help us be able to get it at right the angle we want, which is about like that, I think. Maybe a little bit more, a little lower, perhaps. There we go. Excellent. Okay. Now let's do the other horn. I want to see what this looks like, so let's get off of this layer. And we'll go ahead and zoom out here for a second. All right, so that's definitely fitting in with our values more. And I'm just going to duplicate it, and we'll scale it up just a little bit, and we'll just have two of them like that. Okay, and we'll be able to go in and adjust you know, some small paint details and stuff so it looks not quite like a copy. Okay. All right, perfect. Now we can take our eraser tool and soften up the edges a bit. And then on the horn layer, let's go to our original layer. We can get rid of the remnants of the original horn. Okay. Let's go ahead and zoom out, make sure that's looking good. Okay. Awesome. And then something else we can do here is, let's go back to our horn layer,
we want to adjust the hue and saturation so that it matches up a little better with the rest of what we got going on. Excellent. So that, I'm doing one more quick pass over to make sure we got everything, but I think that looks about good for our texture layer. Okay, so now we still have a little bit ways to go before this thing is complete. We're gonna have to go back into Procreate and work all of this together to make sure that it fits as one cohesive image instead of kind of this monster mash of other layers. So I need to select all of these. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and merge them down. And that should put all of our textures on one layer. And then we can do one final adjustment on everything to make sure it's all working cohesively. And we're going to do one more gamma check here. All right. Perfect. All right, so now we're ready to take it back into Procreate and work on the next part. All right, so we have all of our textures and I brought it back into Procreate. I've imported it as a Photoshop document, so I still have all my separate layers here. And I just did a multiply layer with some colors to help blend the horn to match the rest of his body. Okay, so we should be able to just merge these down now. Let's see if it ends up looking weird. And maybe just erase out some of that hard line just a little bit. Okay, perfect. And now what we're going to need to do, we're going to make a new layer. This is going to be on top of everything else. So we're going to set this to multiply, and we're going to go about starting to set the rest of our texture into the image. Okay, so I have my round brush, and we're going to go ahead and come in here and all the parts that just need to be brought a little bit darker in order to really define them. So for example, coming up here underneath the eyelid, or I guess the eye ridge more like, right? Some of these wrinkles that we brought in when we use the textures, I'm going to define just a little bit more. Okay, some of these areas underneath the ridge, his nose was a good example of one. Inside of his mouth. Just along the shape of his head here. Really try and bring in some definition. It's right here under his neck. Some. Okay. We're also going to need to put some, I'm going to go ahead and select the shape of the horn so that we can, get some shadow under here on the bottom side of the horns. And then we'll cast that shadow down onto the horn beneath it. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and lighten all of that up just a little bit with my eraser tool so it's not quite so dark. We can come over here and some of these wrinkles and just help push it a little bit darker there. Getting some of these cracks and crevices and really make sure that it's going as dark as it needs to be. Excellent. We can come just looking around one last time. I think for the most part everything looks pretty good. So now what we're going to do is make a new layer, and this layer I'm going to do the eyes and the claws, and as well as blend in the horns more with the rest of his body. So let's go with the claws first. For the claws, I want to do color about like this, I think. And I'm going to use, I'm actually going to use a fat pencil brush for this, because I want it to be able to get a little bit narrower as well as have a little bit more texture. Okay, so I'm starting out by just clearly defining all of the claws here. I'm going to do a little bit on his horn as well so that we can sort of begin to blend those two colors. We want it to match the claws and horns a little bit more. And let's do these ones up here. Okay. Excellent. Now I'm going to go ahead and we're going to bring a little bit orange and a little bit more dark. And we'll use this to sort of shade in the back side here where it sort of connects. Next, we're going to go ahead and bring it lighter and almost towards the green side of things, because we want it to feel like there's a little bit of translucency to these. And you know, that's a little bit too bright, so bring it down just a little bit. That's better. I'm just kind of taking it in from the tips and sort of fading this color in. Helps it feel like there's a little bit more light shining through. We're not going to do it on the horns as much because we want those to feel thick and a little bit more rugged, so we don't want light to shine through those. So we're going to actually ignore the horns. We'll come up here to his wing claws. Okay, excellent. Now, let's go ahead and do the shadows. So we're going to bring it warmer again. Bring it right down here. And it looks like we need to make it a little darker. Okay, excellent. And then now let's go ahead in the highlights. We're going to bring it way bright to really nail these in with some really nice shine. Do these ones up here on his wings. All right. Excellent. Let's go ahead and do a little bit on his horn, a few bright highlight spots. Good. And I think as far as the horns go, that looks about good. Now let's go ahead. What we're going to do, we're going to color select whatever color is kind of around the claw and the skin. We're going to use that to sort of encase it in there, the claw. Okay. Now we bring it a little darker so we can get a little bit of a shadow edge there on some of them. Those look pretty good. And now we can come over here to the horns and sort of try and blend these in a little bit more. I want to color pick that nice deep dark brownish red color in there and bring it through. All right, excellent. So that looks like it's blended pretty nicely. I'm going to lighten up that layer just a little bit. Actually, we're going to do curves because I really just want to lighten up the darkest part. There we go. Okay. So that looks like it blends fairly nicely, and we got all our shadows in there. I'm just doing a quick pass with my eyes really quick to make sure there's nothing we missed. Doesn't look like there is so far. Oh, you know what? On this layer, let's also do his eye. Okay, so gonna go ahead and get, well, let's experiment. Maybe we don't want to do black. Maybe that's too typical. Now, red looks like he has laser beam eyes. I think we are just gonna actually do black, or at least near black. And so I'm gonna bring it all the way in here, get it really, really dark. Okay. You can go ahead and we're gonna get a light greenish color about like this, and this is gonna be sort of the reflected light on the bottom here. Okay, and then all the way to almost white. And that will be our specular highlight right there. All right, perfect. Look at that. He's really starting to come alive now. All right, so next we're going to come back, and we're going to have to work in the rest of all of this texture, right? It's not quite sitting perfectly on top of everything. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to get a nice bright color for our highlights. And we're going to come in here and we're going to have to look at where the texture is. And one little area at a time, we're going to come through here and put those highlights on those textures. Now you don't want to do it everywhere. You don't want to go crazy with this, okay? You need to be very selective in the areas you choose. Otherwise it can really start to overdo it and it will look weird. It won't look right, okay? As you can see, I'm just coming in here, picking a few of these textures, brightening them up a little bit, just like that, you can see, okay? I'll do some on his eye here. Let's do some down here on his lower eyelid ridge. Okay, picking up just a little bit of light as it comes up that way. You can see how I'm really breaking up my highlights. They're not just one, really hard solid shape, because I want it to feel like it's scaly, right? Not just this super smooth texture. Okay. Got his nose over here. Do some of these big scales over here on his jaw. And now the really nice thing about this is that since it's on a separate layer, I can come back and just erase away some of the parts that maybe are a little too bright and need to be knocked back a bit so they're not so, in your face. Make them a little bit more subtle if we need to. Go ahead, bring it over here to the other side of his head. I'm going to bring this a little brighter. Alright, come back here on the back of his head. Pick up just a little bit of light. Maybe some of these scales over here right by his ear. I might need to pull that back a little bit, a little too much there. Okay. Come in here on his arm and pick up just a few of these little highlights here. Same with this arm. Go ahead and take some of these and pull them all the way out. Go ahead and knock back some of this just a little bit. We still want it to be highlighted, just maybe not so bright. So I'm just going over these photo textures that we put in and enhancing them a little bit with these highlights so that it blends in with all the rest of our lighting. It feels real and like it belongs there. It's not just, you know, kind of pasted on top and kind of awkwardly sitting there. We want it to feel like it's part of the picture and that it was that way all along. Right? Okay, bring my eraser and I'm just gonna knock back a few of these ones here a little bit. Still want them there, just not as strong. It's all about finding balance. If all of your highlights are equally bright, then they're not really going to be highlights. They're just going to be a bunch of little bright spots all over your picture, and it's going to look kind of weird and bad, right? So you need to make sure that you're very particular with where you place these and that you do it sparingly so that it looks right, that you can kind of mix up the variance of how bright and how strong these different parts are. I'm getting a little bit looser and a little bit more rough up here on the wings because I know that they're going to be blurred and sort of out of focus, so I'm not putting too much effort and concern into them since they're not going to have a lot of detail on them. I don't want to spend unnecessary time on something that's not going to be valid or important when you won't be able to see it all. Bring my brush size down and come over here and start working in some of the scales on his legs here. And I should also mention we're going to have to go back and do all this the same thing all over using the blue for the other lights. Can really see how adding these highlights ties in the scales on his leg here. It really makes it feel like it's solid and a part of this creature. Let's do these scales on his hand here because those are pretty important. I'm gonna go ahead and take my eraser tool and knock some of that back on his hand just a little bit. And on this front arm too, we'll knock that back. Maybe not that much, just a touch. Okay, his tail here. We don't need to get super detailed because like I said, this part is gonna be it's going to be out of focus. I'm just doing some little dots here to emphasize some texture. All right, awesome. Now, I'm actually going to come up here. We're going to brighten some of these up a little bit. I want this back part to feel pretty shiny. All right, we're getting ready to integrate some of our final finishing touches. All right, so one of those is going to be to add some light that's kind of shining through maybe the frill on his head a little bit, or his horns possibly, and his underside of his wing as well. So I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to set this layer to overlay, okay? And I have a big soft airbrush selected here, and this is what we're going to use to brush in some of this light that's going to be shining through. Now at first it's going to seem really strong, okay, and that's okay because we can sort of come through afterwards and lighten it up with either the our eraser tool, or even just lightening it up with the opacity. Okay, so for the horn I'm actually going to go with more of a yellow orange color to lighten up there. And you're right, even that seems too bright, so I'm going to go even more yellow, bring it a little darker, and try that. That seems like it's working a little better. I don't know, it just doesn't seem, maybe we don't need it. Sometimes you have a plan, and then once you try to implement it, you realize it looks better without it. So let's go over to his wings, though. We definitely would want to do that on his wings. We're mostly going to focus near the center of this shape here, because that's where the most light is going to come through, and the further it gets out to the edges, the less impactful it will be, because the skin gets a little thicker. Okay, so about something like that I think looks pretty nice. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my eraser tool. We're going to soften this area on his head a little bit, and I think that looks about perfect. Right, there is our light shining through. Okay, now there's some more things we need to do. We're not quite finished yet. All right, one of them is going to be to really help focus our composition. So to do that, I'm thinking what I want is for half of him to sort of fall back into shadow a little bit. And so that the focus is really, even though this back part's going to be out of focus anyways, I really want the main part of the attention to fall on the front part of him. Okay, so I'm going to do this so that the back half is sort of in the shadows here. And I can go ahead and lighten that just a little bit. We don't want too crazy. Okay, so that looks really nice. Let's go ahead and make a new layer on top of that. We're going to set this one to color dodge. Okay, and this is where we're going to come in and start to burn in some of our highlights with this really bright yellow color. We're going to have our soft airbrush. We're going to bring the size down pretty low, and oops, let's make it a little bit more yellow, I think. There we go. I'm going to come in and really burn in some of these highlights by just lightly going over some of the areas with the brightest highlight. And you can see it kind of blows them out a little bit. Makes them feel really warm, makes it feel like there's some sunlight coming down and hitting these bright spots. Okay, I'm not doing it everywhere, really just the kind of the brightest areas that I can find. Okay. Maybe a little bit here on his arm, on his horn a little bit. Okay. And after I do that, I can mess with the opacity, bring it down, bring it up wherever it feels a little more accurate. I think right about there looks good. Okay, so we're getting close. Stay with me. It's a long process, but it's worth it. Okay, so we've done that. Next, I'm going to create a new layer. We're going to set this one to overlay, and this is going to be our layer that sort of helps tie everything together. Okay, so we're going to get this bright orangey brown sort of color, and I'm going to go ahead and select the shape of our guy, because we want to make sure we're not going outside the lines. And at this point, I'm actually going to move this down and merge those together. Okay, so we have that shape selected, and with our soft airbrush, we're just going to brush in some of this. Let's make sure we're on the right layer. There we go. This really bright sunlit sort of color that's coming down and being cast on most of this image here. And we're just going to paint it in wherever there's sunlight that will be hitting this. Okay, so the log. Right now it might look a little bit silly and just over the top, but it's okay because we're going to be adjusting it. Then we're going to do the blue and do the same thing but for the shadow side to really contrast that this is, you know, being hit by sunlight, really warm sunlight. Okay. Blue over there. Excellent. Then we can go ahead and lower the opacity on it because we don't want it that extreme. But we do want this to really be indicating some color variation. So when I turn that on and off, you can see it really makes a big difference. Okay. Excellent. And we're almost there. Just looking over everything, making sure there's not any extra spots we're missing or anything like that. And it looks pretty dang good. Okay. So our last step is going to be to add a texture layer, which we're going to come over here, click on insert a photo, come over here to textures, and I'm going to pick this grunge sort of pattern. Okay, we're going to set it to multiply. I'm going to bring the opacity way, way down. Okay, so that you can almost barely even see it. But it will help it sort of almost feel like it's a photograph. And at this point, you can come back in and adjust the background if you need to, you know, mess with the hue a little bit or anything like that. Bring up the saturation, darken it, brighten it, whatever it is you want to do. I'm going to put it right about there. Okay. And that's it. The last and final step, which we'll do in the next lecture, is going to be to add the depth of field and particle effects.
All right, so the next step we're going to need to do is add the depth of field effect. And this is our last step, okay? So I've gone ahead and merged all my layers in Procreate and brought it into Photoshop as a PNG so that I can keep the nice high quality, image quality. And I have the blur tool selected. Now the reason we're doing this in Photoshop instead of Procreate is because Procreate, depending on how big your file is or how large your canvas size is, it can really put a strain on your iPad or whatever it is you're using, and it tends to not come out very smooth. So I think Photoshop has more power for this type of thing. It tends to work better. So what we're going to be doing, first we need to pick a focal point. And for that, I'm going to pick about right here, this area of his face, okay, and his head, neck area. That's where the most detail is. That's where I want everyone to look. And this is going to be the area that's in focus. Now, everything that moves further away in space from this area, either back away from the viewer or closer towards the viewer, is going to be more and more out of focus. So, for example, let's start with his horns here. The tip of his horns will just barely be out of focus because they're getting ever so slightly further away from where that focal point is. Okay, so we slowly do that. This arm back here is a good example. This is going to be out of focus. The log. And you can see now why earlier we didn't have to worry so much about putting so much detail in, because we knew that later down the line it was just going to be sort of blurred out. Okay. Let's do his wings. This back wing out here is going to be way farther back, so it's really going to be pushed out of focus. And if you need to, you can turn the strength up a little bit. I want it to be even blurrier back here. Oops, we didn't want to grab that much though. Let's Bring the brush size down just a little bit. And we'll need to, make sure that we don't pull too much. Okay. All right, now we can do, now go ahead and bring the strength down a little bit now. The swing back here, we can push out of focus. The log back here, as well as his backside. It's part of his leg, his tail. And I think that looks about good as far as the blur effect goes. I think you don't want to get it too much more than that. Some areas over here I think we can blur out a little bit more. You can see it makes it look like it's being taken with a photograph, and some parts are just sort of out of focus, which is exactly what the look we're going for. All right, so that's it for this lecture. You guys have finally completed it. With practice, hopefully you can get it looking to a level that you're happy with, and just keep trying. Practice makes perfect. It's a tough technique to master. It takes a lot of hard work, but I'm certain if you work hard, you can get there. So I'll see you guys in the next lecture.